be recognized. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate your service and your dedication to our nation. And next, I'd like to, we just got through with the landscape tour. We had a ton of volunteers that put it all together. So I would like now to have all those volunteers stand up and be recognized. It's probably half the audience. Thank you. Okay, let me see if, well. Oh, it, it clicked at me. Okay. Our mission is to promote preservation, conservation, and restoration of native plants. And that's a shortened version of the official FNPS mission. Here are the upcoming events. Primarily November and December. Saturday, the 16th, is Turkey Creek Park in the Dark event, and we will have a few people there. And it sounds like fun if you want to, especially, I think it's a lot for kids, which could be a fun thing if you've got some grandkids or kids. Then our next meeting is Monday, December 9th, and it's our annual wreath making. And if you're new to it, come. It's a lot of fun. We provide the wreaths and all the plant material. We also have lots of ribbons and other stuff to decorate it. If you have like a special ornament or something, you can bring that, but you don't need to bring plants. Okay? So we look forward. It's also going to be held in the gymnasium, and I'm not too sure which direction that is. I think that direction, Linda? That direction. But we'll have somebody posted here to kind of point you in the right place, because it's a little bit different. And then our January meeting is how homeowners can transition to natives. Because a lot of us started out with a house that was probably landscaped by your builder with lots of probably exotic or at least non-native plants. And you can't just, most of us can't just go in and say, okay, get rid of all this, I'm planting all native. So it's kind of like, okay, how do you go through trying to redo parts of it? So this should be a very interesting speaker. And we also, one other, Carol, Hebert, we do have some requests we're going to pass around for volunteer information. Go ahead, Carol. They're hard to get on.
It's hard for me to stand up, so anyway. How are you guys doing tonight? Pretty good? Seem very quiet. Everybody's happy?
Y'all are asleep?
Y'all are happy. Excuse me, I think the whole thing just slid down my throat, so I apologize.
It's hard, it's very, yeah.
I think I got it. Did they get the ha-ha? That's all I wanted. All right, so the first thing I want to do is send out a clipboard so that you can sign up. How many of you enjoyed the food and drinks tonight? Woo! Yes. They're delicious and very diverse and all kinds of good stuff. So we're going to have so much fun for the making wreaths. And so we'll need to just make that very sociable. So I'll need people to sign up for snacks and drinks. So I have this sign up board, and it's really just asking you for your name, phone number, and email. And I'll get back with you, and we'll see what you're going to bring. And just so maybe nobody is all doing cookies or something like that, you know, we'll have to divvy it up a little bit. And again, as you mentioned in January, Lisa is going to talk about, and I have how homeowners can have their transition. And I forgot the last couple of words two natives on
Native,
my team. That's what it always is about. So we're going to have that to native. So if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and just start with you guys here. If you have time to do it, great. If not, it's not the end of the world because we put this out at every single meeting. So you can look at it, see what you may want to do, and then just pass it around. We'll hope to get to everybody. One thing I don't have on the that I asked to do is this Thursday, the 14th, during the day, we are going to be mulch and putting in some side bars, not side bars, the to be in our landscape at Dr. Martin Luther King's library, right there on University Boulevard. So we have just a couple of hours. Some of you I know have been there and know it's not too big of a place to go, but we got 12 bags we'd love to have. And Carl's going to be great. He's going to cut some of them down. They're adding a new place to put their bikes up closer, so we're going to move things around. And so I just have a sign up sheet here, and it's just 9:30 to noon. We'll probably be done by noon. But if you have any time this coming Thursday, we'd love to have you help out. So I just need a handful. And again, I'll call you, I'll contact you about what's up. Everybody know where I'm talking about? The Dr. Martin Luther King? I see some heads nodding. Yeah, it's down by Stone Middle School, and we did a great landscaping there. The fire bush looks fantastic, all that kind of stuff. So we just want to adhere and get the edgings in right. So I might start this from this side, and you can just hand it back if you work or whatever. But that's what I have. So if you have any questions on those, let me know, okay? All right,
Thank you, Carol.
you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, and Jane's going to introduce this evening's speaker for us. And yep.
Thank you. Okay. You know, Bill, I never asked you, how exactly do you say your last name? Deluccia. Somebody told me I was wrong. No. So we're very happy tonight to have Bill Deluccia with us. Bill is, as you saw in our newsletter, he's the Ocean Friendly Gardens Coordinator for Space Coast Surfrider's Ocean Friendly Gardens program. He's also the Vice Chair of Indialantic Sustainability Board, which is a rockin' sustainability board. I'm on the Palm Bay one, and we look up with all the beachside ones, so we're jealous. But he's also been a passionate conservationist, nature plant gardener, educator, and project manager for over 2 decades. How many of y'all have been to Bill's house on the tour? Awesome house. If you ever get a chance, and he has sometimes said he'll do like a freebie if you want to contact him. If you're beachside, I would highly recommend it because it's just an awesome example of all you can do beachside. Okay, some people get a little intimidated, but it's an awesome program. I'm going to turn it over to Bill. He's going to be a little informal tonight.
Yes, I am.
You can hold him up.
Thanks.
Yay.
Can you guys hear me without a mic? All right, let's do that. All right, can you hear me? All right, I'm getting over a cold, so it's worse. All right. Is that it? Can you guys hear me? All right, I'll just try and talk loud. So the topic is basically, as you see, creating wildlife and ocean-friendly gardens. This is kind of intimidating to me to talk to a room full of other experts on native plants. So I just want you to know that you can't hear me. All right, I gotta put this on. All right, so can you hear me now? Okay, so essentially, like I was saying a second ago, is a little intimidating talking to a bunch of peers that know as much as I do about native plants. But I want to just give you some perspectives on essentially the program that Surfrider has called Ocean Friendly Gardens, and also kind of the why behind the reason I got into it was wildlife conservation initially. And so what we're going to do is go through a few slides that show some wildlife benefits and some of the things there. And then we'll get into some of the more sciencey type stuff that'll show how native plants are really helping with water quality improvements in the Indian River Lagoon and other estuaries as well. So let me get going. So essentially what you see here is, the benefits of the lagoon to our community. It's multi-billions of dollars. I think it's something like $7 billion estimated annually. And obviously, if any of you fish or bird or enjoy any time on the water, what we're talking about is the only way to protect water resources is to protect the land around those water resources. And the best way to protect land is to protect the native plants that are endemic to that area and then to that land. And that's how you protect those bodies of water. Along with that, the quality of life that we all enjoy when the Indian River Lagoon is clean is a financial bonus to us all as well. I know years ago Tampa Bay turned guacamole green, and essentially people lost literally a quarter of their home values based on the fact that no one wants to live in an area where water is so polluted that they can't boat or recreate on that water. So why native plants? You all probably know most of this, but they've evolved here. They've been here longer than us. Florida geologically is relatively young. However, the central highest part of Florida that runs up and down the Lake Wales Ridge, I think that's been above the ocean for something like 2 million years. The rest of us have, here in this area, waffled between underwater and above water between the ice ages. But all these native plants have evolved here over tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. They don't require fertilizer, which is key to protecting water resources. No pesticides needed, obviously, either. Mangroves are actually, fun fact, the plant on this planet that provides the most carbon capture as well. So when we're talking about other benefits of some of our native plants, we look at certain species and they do a remarkable job just where we need some help nowadays, right? Whether it be helping our pollinators or helping capture carbon, these native plants are doing outstanding jobs. They perpetuate healthy ecosystems and biodiversity. That's what we're going to get into next. And essentially, they provide those ecosystems to imperiled wildlife because the biggest cause of our biodiversity and biomass decline on Earth is habitat loss. So I tried a lot of the pictures you'll see, about 95% of them are from my yard. And so I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about my bird friends here. These are screech owls. For those of you that don't know that, most of you probably do. But they're an amazing little owl that tops out at about 7.5, 8 inches tall. And they're very beneficial. I mean, they eat what we all like to call palmetto bugs, aka cockroaches, and other creepy crawlies. But they're great little birds to have around. And a fun fact for you guys that don't want to go drop maybe $80 or $90 on a screech owl box, there's a feed store out there on Minton Road, just south of Emerson. I can't remember the name of it, but they sell parrot boxes for parrots that you want to have, mate if you had parrots. And those parrot boxes just happen to be the same size as screech owl boxes, and they're not as well constructed, but you paint them up with some lacquer. Maybe give them a few coats of that and get them up in the trees, and you guys will bring screech owls to your homes, especially with your native plants that are there. Oh, and those are fledglings on the bottom right there. Fledglings in the middle, and then a couple of the parents to the left. So I refer to it as a little half-acre wildlife refuge, but this past year I saw my first red-headed woodpecker ever. I'm kind of a total bird dork, and birds are my thing. And I saw that red-headed woodpecker right there, which blew me away because I had never seen one in my whole life and many years of birding. That was right in my yard and across the street, going back and forth between the live oaks. By the way, I live in Indialantic, which it's also pretty remarkable that you're seeing that bird over on beachside as well. And if you look in that really horrible picture to the right, that is a white-crowned pigeon. And white-crowned pigeons are native to the Florida Keys in the Caribbean. And that was the first documented white-crowned pigeon in the county, and it was in my tree about, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. And, you know, you guys are probably like, yeah, sure, it's a white-crowned pigeon. It looks like a rock dove. But it is a white-crowned pigeon, and the reason it's sitting in that mahogany tree is when they leave wherever they've left, whether it was the Bahamas or one of the upper Keys, they're going to look for the type of habitat that they're used to. And lo and behold, it found a 40-foot mahogany tree in my yard, and that's where I wanted to hang out for a couple days. So getting into the native plants and how they support specific species and families of different animals. This is a family of bird called wood warblers. You've probably heard about warblers or seen them, but they're these little colorful birds you see in the spring and fall, and they're called neotropical migrants. And the reason they're called neotropical migrants is because these little birds migrate. I mean, these birds might weigh no more than 1.5 ounces or an ounce. And these birds can migrate between northern South America, Central America, island hop all the way over the Caribbean to Florida, and they'll migrate up the entire East Coast into the maritime provinces of Canada and nest in some of those coniferous forests. But when they get here in the spring, after flying over the entire Caribbean, they're starving. And they don't want to see a plant that someone just put in the ground from Lowe's or Home Depot that is half genetically manufactured and might as well be plastic. What they want to see are the plants that they've evolved with for hundreds of thousands and millions of years that they rely on at that specific time of their migration. I can tell you that these beautiful little birds come into my yard and they'll hang out on the strangler figs, on the live oaks, on the pigeon plums, on different plants that are either flowering or fruiting at that time because they're insectivorous birds. And those fruits and flowers are attracting these tiny little insects that you probably couldn't even see without readers or magnifying glasses. But these birds are voraciously feeding on those tiny little insects, and it's the plants that we're providing to them are their lifeline to get to their breeding grounds north of here. Any questions on that, or are you guys familiar with neotropical birds? Got it. Okay. Yeah, question was along the lines of she kind of has a little island of a beautiful habitat of native trees and forested area around her house, but it's such a void area in her neighborhood of the typical, St. Augustine sea of grass and pavers and concrete and all that. So how do you get birds to come to your one little island of hope there? I can't tell you exactly, other than if you can convince just one or two other people in your neighborhood, what starts to happen is they find greenways. So I live right near Orlando Park in the Indialantic, and Orlando Park has some great large canopy trees, and it just seems like along the 400 block and along the river on the barrier island, there's a lot of larger trees. So they follow this greenway, so to speak, all the way up the island. And I just provided them more of that, right? And when you I have over 200 species in my yard. So when I provided all these different species back, you're getting more biodiversity in return. So what I might suggest is, look at your plant list, see what plants you have. If you're interested in these specific types of neotropicals, you could talk to me and I could tell you certain specific plants that'll attract the insects that these particular warblers and neotropicals might like. Because that might be something that'll help as well. These are some more neotropicals. These are not in the warbler families, but there's some other really beautiful birds. You've probably all heard of the Orioles, the baseball team out of Baltimore. That's a Baltimore Oriole in the bottom row there, second from right. But painted bunting, scarlet tanager, rose-breasted grosbeak, and there on the right is an interesting bird called that brown one that's very camouflaged is called a Chuck Will's widow, and they migrate between Central America, the Caribbean, and here as well. But they're not a songbird. They're rather interesting. They're a large bird, and they're so camouflaged they just sit on the ground, and you could walk right up on them. And I flushed one out of my yard this year for the first time, and it was pretty rewarding because they're not that common. So I would venture a guess that a lot of you probably know more about pollinators than I do. I know a lot about birds and mammals and marine life, but pollinators, you probably know what's up here on the screen, but there is a monarch there. There's caterpillar, which I believe is a caterpillar of a monarch. I took those pictures, or not the monarch I didn't take, but I took the picture of the caterpillar. And then what you'll notice as far as the caterpillars on the right and on the lower left, excuse me, yes, those are Atala butterflies. Do you guys know what those are? You know the story behind the Atala butterflies in Florida? Anyone? No? Yeah, they were thought to be extinct. That's right. They were thought to be completely wiped off of North America, basically, or the U.S. And their host plant is a coontie. And I guess when more people started using coontie, 10, 20 years ago in landscaping, they found one small grouping of these in Southeast Florida. And then with the advent of more and more people using coontie and the coontie being shipped up and down the coast, now we have populations of them up here in Brevard as well, which is really cool. Having gone from, thought to be extinct here in Florida to pretty much thriving right now, at least in Indialantic, there's quite a few of them. Excuse me for a second, I gotta get a drink of water. Nothing like a cold. Anyone have any questions? General questions so far? I question was, where do you place out nesting boxes for owls, especially those parrot boxes I told you about at the feed store? I had mine up only about 15 to 20 feet. They're not real picky. I try not to have it facing where the sun's going to have the most exposure. I try to get it on the side of a tree where they're going to have the least sun exposure, just for heating purposes. You don't want to bake them in there. But that's what I would recommend. And also, you don't want it to be really super easily accessible, like for rat snakes or something like that, to be able to just go up there and get in. So you might want to ask like someone to get on a ladder and get it up there in a pretty tough to climb area. Excuse me. Oops. Speaking of snakes, so once again, I didn't take all these pictures, but I've seen every one of these reptiles in my yard, and I only have a little less than half acre, but it's pretty cool. Where I live in Indialantic, there are really no gopher tortoises, but about 2 years ago, I had an immature gopher tortoises look like that. He was just cruising through my yard, just trying to find habitat. This is gonna be rough. Sorry, guys. I knew this was gonna happen. Yeah. So gopher tortoise, ringneck snake, the green anoles, which are excuse me, in a little bit of trouble because they've been outcompeted by the brown anoles, which you see everywhere. The lizards that you see every day on your feet, running around all over the place, those are from the Caribbean. They're called brown anoles. The greens are more arboreal. And they really have to be more arboreal now, meaning tree dwelling, because the browns have pushed them literally up into the canopies because the browns will eat their young. I put that snake in the middle there. That's a juvenile black racer. You guys see black racers all the time, but I thought I'd just show you what a juvenile looks like because a lot of people confuse those with pygmy rattlesnakes. And that's their intent. When they're little, they mimic the colors of a pygmy rattlesnake. They even shake their tail as young and actually act like a pygmy rattlesnake. Yes. If you look at the eyes of any non-venomous snake, they're round and they're perfectly round, and they have like a peephole. Pit vipers, we only have pit vipers in the state. Actually, coral snakes are not pit vipers. But thank you. I'm dying. So pit vipers have that cat eye. You know, you have that eye that literally has a slit. Yeah, but they're not aggressive. You literally have to step on a pit viper to get bit by a pit viper, basically. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the head itself on the pit vipers is more of like a diamond shape, whereas non-venomous snakes have a longer, skinnier head. So these are the fuzzy little guys we all have in our yards, and you know, to me, that's part about like every day I come home from work, walk around my yard with my dog, who's also into animals and doesn't want to eat them or anything like most dogs. We just check out the nature, and I mean, it's so refreshing and brings your blood pressure down. And I didn't take all these pictures, obviously, but every one of those animals I've seen in my yard except the bobcat. However, there are bobcats beachside, and you'd be surprised how little land they can use. I bet you anything there's bobcats right next to us right now in this grove of woods that extends all the way along Crane Creek, and they're just getting pushed out of their habitat, and they don't have many places to go. All right, so we're going to get more into the why behind native plants again. Excuse me. So the population here has grown from less than 200,000 back in the 50s to over 1 million. This is accounting for all 5 of the counties along the Indian River Lagoon. In fact, there's probably well over that now. I mean, Brevard alone is up over 600,000 by itself, and Deluccia is, I think, over that. However, how we've altered the channel, how we've altered the water that flows into the lagoon is the reason the lagoon is in so much trouble. And when we channelize and have all these canals that lead like a racetrack right into the lagoon without any kind of filtration systems, natural processes, it's a problem. So the urbanization that replaces these native plant communities it's troublesome. And unless people like all you in this room try to spread the word about what we're doing and try to get more plants back onto private property, the river's just not going to be able to survive. Just no way around it. So what it comes down to is all the excess nutrients and pollutants that are flowing into the river. Nutrients do a good job of growing plants. They also do a good job of growing algae. So when those nutrients get in the Indian River, they fuel algae blooms and they cause fish kills. Because when these algae all die at the same time simultaneously, because that's how they grow and feed, and they're in the river and they're growing and growing. They form these massive areas that can encompass, tens of square miles of the inlet. Back in 2016, many of you probably remember the brown algae blooms in. When they exhaust themselves and they're finished, and they've basically grown to the size they can't grow anymore, they all die at once. The organisms all die at once as far as algae, and it consumes all the oxygen in the water. That's what causes these fish kills. So what we really have to do a better job of is not using fertilizers or mitigating and minimizing how much sod we have in our yards. Because if you think about what the sod is grown in, it's basically it's like a nuclear bomb of clay and fertilizers that they grow out there on the Dudall Ranch with, their hundreds of acres that they're, cutting and throwing on people's yards. And then over time, as it rains on that, it's just leaching those nutrients out of the grass, down into the groundwater, and sheeting out into the Indian River Lagoon. So some of these facts are kind of troublesome too. Over half of all our water in Brevard goes to watering lawns, and over half of all the people in Florida rely on the off-Florida aquifer, which runs from South Georgia all the way down the east coast of Florida, down towards South Florida, for their drinking water. And you've probably heard stories about how people are tapping into the Florida aquifer, and there's some salt problems in certain areas with that, because the depletion of the aquifer allows from the outward pressure of salt water to now start intruding into these caverns that have been created, because there's no more outward pressure from the fresh water that was in these aquifers. So we're literally choosing, in the state, we're essentially choosing to water a toxic, gnarly, ugly, monotonous green turf lawn over our own health of healthy drinking water. And to me, it's pretty crazy. Once again, I love some of these pictures. You got a kid putting some fertilizer out there, and then you have the signs that once you put the fertilizer out, please keep your kids and dogs off the grass so they don't turn green and die overnight. So, just the cycle we go through. So, and then you all know about sunshine mimosa? Yes? No? There we go. So the way I've always tried to talk to people about this is, hey, everyone has their grass yards at first when you first move in. Instead of trying to rip everything out and killing yourself, you just get the plugs of the sunshine mimosa and put it maybe every 2 or 3 feet. And then over time, that's going to grow and mesh in with the grass. You're not fertilizing. You're not using any pesticide anymore. And then eventually that sunshine mimosa is going to overtake and outgrow the grass over a long period of time. Also, it's a nitrogen fixer, which is nice because it'll fixate some of those nitrogen loads from the grass into the actual roots of the sunshine mimosa as well. Just talking about ocean-friendly gardens, why native plants help protect areas that are coastally bound. This is a picture of my yard, and just showing you that permeability is another component of this, of making sure you're using native plants, but also make sure that you have the permeability to recharge that aquifer, right? To let the water get down instead of running off with those nutrient loads into the storm drains that might be right at the end of the street. These are just, some examples of pretty native flowers. You're probably familiar with them all. Coral honeysuckle, dune sunflower, that's rouge plant on the upper right, horse mint lower left, firebush, and beautyberry. And the reason I had native plants that are not colorless and weedy, it's just kind of making fun of like the common misconceptions about native plants. They're all weedy, they're colorless, they all look the same. And in fact, this is another one of those, they all look the same. But upper left is that's a key thatch palm in the upper left. Then you have ironweed in the middle, paradise tree on the right, red tip cocoa plum on the bottom left. And in the middle, if you can tell at the bottom there, there's a bridge, like an aerial tramway there in that middle bottom picture. And that's the other misconception I used to battle in our neighborhood was my wife and everyone thought you had to have grass for your kids to run around and play. You gotta have grass. Well, we put in a tree house with like aerial like walkways to it, kind of like treetop track. And every kid in the entire like 2 miles from around our house was at our house all the time playing in the woods instead of out on the grass. So there's a lot of benefit to having kids grow up in nature rather than rolling around in freshly polluted and poisoned grasses. So I think you're going to have a talk coming up, as I just heard, about how to start going native. And I try to help people with that. And really what it comes down to is you got to start small. You start with one bed at a time, and you grow from there. You can't tackle the whole yard all at once, or you're going to kill yourself. Any questions on that, Mom? Here? So this is something that I have noticed in the past couple of years. I'm interested on if you feel the same, but it does seem like there is more and more exposure in media about native plants and the benefits. And I think we're starting to, I can't say we've turned the corner, but I think we're getting there. You know, we're not the crazy people now. You know, it's like, hey, there's some mainstream thoughts out there that actually native plants do some good, right? And back when Lagoon Loyal came up, that was the Lagoon Loyal Lagoon Friendly Lawns. I was the first house that they asked to do at KBB, and there was like news people that came out. I'm like, wow, this is cool. But I was watching the Weather Channel last week, and I missed it on Saturday morning, but they were talking about native plants this past Saturday morning, and I don't know if anyone saw it, but it's coming out very frequently that the media is starting to plug it, and there are solutions that are being realized that are now talking about more in the mainstream, especially with like flood mitigation, carbon capture with tree canopies and things like this. It's real. So, any thoughts on that? Anyone agree? Yeah. Well, the big box stores that I mean, that's going to be that's when we've won, right? That's when you've made it big time. Um, I don't know, other than I think most of us have probably driven down in South Florida through Homestead, and there's nurseries down there that are, it's miles and miles and miles of Ixoria and green Ligustrum and blah 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 blah, and they're all on their way to Home Depot and Lowe's and all that crap, but. I think it's just supply and demand. I mean, we just got to push that demand. And the other good thing is being on a sustainability board with Christine here in Indialantic. You can get involved with your local communities, and we have a sustainability plan in Indialantic now where we mandate we have to use X amount of native plants for new construction and things like this. So the other thing is any of the public public lands in Indialantic, we have an edict saying, hey, we're going to get rid of class 1 and 2 invasive plants. We're only going to landscape with natives in our park. So yes. Here, here. Hey, and fun fact, my son who just graduated USF, he's an environmental science major. He's been growing plants from that's my yard, all these big trees. He's been growing seedlings since he was 12 in my yard, right? So now he sells the native butterfly flowers and skip and weird, wacky and weird or whatever. So he sells like the trays, the little guys, and then they step them up. So you guys probably all have some plants from my yard already. So my son's one of those guys. Yeah, there you go. Yes.
going through a transition period, existing St. Augustine discussing law, and my background is environmental science, so I can realize that practice what we preach. I'm clear what we are. Growing aside from the ground anyway, so pretty much on its way out before I ever get. I can just take those plugs, put them not so happy St. Augustine grass.
Absolutely, yeah. And actually, it works out well because it is so overwhelming. I've seen people try to do a whole area of new sunshine mimosa. If you think about it, you'd have to put them 6 inches to 10 inches apart and then like fluff them up to make it look like there's anything there for the first few months. But when you do it and you just throw it in and forget about it, you just water them in, just water it as if you're just watering that turf area. They're going to start to thrive. And the good news is you don't have to do the work to make it look viable because the grass is kind of there doing its dying thing over a few years while they're growing and coming up. It's a good transition period. Oh, sorry. Can I go back? Oh, yeah. So the other thing is the cultural changes with the lagoon-friendly lawns. And just so you know, ocean-friendly gardens, Surfrider Foundation, I'll just do a quick plug on them. They're one of the world's largest water and coastal conservation nonprofits. So they're really well known in California. They're really well known on the West Coast. But we have a chapter here on the Space Coast as well, and I run that program, the Ocean Friendly Garden Program. But essentially, it's doing what you all do with Florida Native Plant Society as well, right? And there's a lot of us all trying to accomplish the same goals. And the one thing I would say is that we have to start probably working together on some of these goals, right? And like there's more power in numbers. So I think some of the successes we have found is just the fact that when you find an interesting party, just grab onto them and partner with them, you know? So this is what we're trying to do, right? All our programs are trying to mitigate and minimize or reduce or get rid of completely fertilizers. Make better use of our rainwater by using rain barrels. Use natives, obviously, and then minimize that sod footprint. The sod footprint is the biggest piece of it. Got to get rid of it. And then I was just going to show you some pictures of all the ocean-friendly gardens. This is one that we did at Indialantic Elementary when my kids were there. So my son's 23 and my daughter's 19, so that tells you it's been there a while. But it was cool. We made an outdoor classroom right outside the library where they had seating and crushed coquina and Florida coontie. We did a row of that. We did some privets. We also did varnish leaf, some cassia, and firebush. And it was just a good outside, like outdoor, kind of like almost like an outdoor lab, not lab, but the kids could see the bees. They could go out there and do their art. They could do what they wanted. It's a cool little garden. This was a garden we did at Rickman Park, also the Melbourne Beach Pier. So worked with Nicole Perna years ago on this, and the city of Mel Beach, and we did a really good job of restoring some of the riverfront buffer garden there to capture those nutrients before it goes into the Indian River. I don't know if you've all had a chance to see these. I'm just showing them to you in case you want to go check any of these out for examples. This is this is actually Crane Creek, the Crane Creek Preserve Golf Course, the old Melbourne Municipal Golf Course. So we had an idea that if you think about it, golf courses have a lot of nutrients, right? And Crane Creek runs right through the middle of that golf course. So we've been slowly chipping away, and I've had conversations with like people in Melbourne about, hey, how can we get together on this and try to prevent all those nutrients of flowing down Crane Creek into the harbor and out into the lagoon. So once again, native plants with their extensive root systems and their willingness to feed on nutrients just like any other plant and not requiring any other maintenance, we're trying to get them to do more of these plantings. So we did this planting about 2 years ago. There's a bunch of people I work with there in my professional career. But we had a bunch of people show up and we did a huge area. And I will give you a lesson learned. And the lesson learned was I was talking to the town a bunch of times like, hey, did you guys clear that grass? Did you get a sod cutter out there? And they're like, oh, we couldn't get the sod cutter. We just mowed it really low. So you know what happens when that happens. The grass grass came right back in after we planted all these plants. And so trial and error for the city, because we were like, you got to get it 3-4 inches deep. We got to put some hardscaping in there, or pine straw, or some nuggets, or sustainable mulch. None of that got to happen in time for the planting. So we planted the plants. The grass came back. But now we're working with a really good guy there in Melbourne who, since the golf course is closed down right now, they're redoing it anyways. He's going to go around and sod cut around all these plants, which are now like 5 and 6 feet tall, some of these shrubs and trees, and they're going to reestablish that garden. This is what we're doing currently in Indialantic. There's a pedway along. It starts at Lily Park in south of Fifth Avenue, but it goes behind the houses once you leave Lily Park. And there's these big swales the town put in. And just like every town, they throw grass in the bottom of the swales. Not really productive. Sod is not, what we want in the bottom of these swales, leaching out those nutrients we talked about. And not to mention, a lot of this sod is so thick with clay that they grow it in that it becomes impermeable after a half-inch of rain anyways. So the town agreed that we could cut the bottom of the swales out, and now we're restoring them with native plants that can take seasonal inundation. So that's a project we're in the midst of right now. That first one was this past Earth Day, about a 70-foot section, and in December we're doing a 160-foot section, and then we'll have another 160-foot section we do next Earth Day. Excuse me? I'm sorry. It's so, do you know where Lily Park is? Yeah, it's so Riverside Drive comes, so if you take a right when you come over the bridge and you go down Riverside Drive, about 3 blocks down there's a park called Lily Park. And there's a bike path that you'll notice kind of shoots off behind it. That's the pedway. It starts there and goes to Melbourne Avenue, which is the street I live on, which is like 4 blocks south of that. But it runs behind the houses there. And they did this because the lowest part of the barrier island is in that 400 block. Anywhere you are on the barrier island, the dune's the highest, and towards the river is the lowest. So the areas that are most susceptible for flooding on the barrier islands are closest to the river, because everything sheets down towards the Indian River Lagoon. That's why all the nutrients, all the pollutants are going in the lagoon from the island. They're all coming from I-95 out here on the mainland, and they're all coming to the east. So it's like a big bowl that fills up. But that's why they put the swales there, is for floodwater mitigation. And when we educated them about on the sustainability board that you can't just throw sod in the bottom of them. One live oak can store 10,000 gallons of water. Why not put plants in there that can actively and willingly take up the nutrients along with store more water so the town doesn't flood? That's what we're trying to do. Oh, I'm sorry. Oops, what am I doing? All over the map. All right, we're almost there. I'm sorry, I'm taking too long. So that was where we were. This is Douglas Park, and like Rickman Park, we did a upland river buffer zone right along the seawall there because the zoo had put in oysters maybe 7-8 years ago. And right after the zoo put in oyster beds in the water, we decided to put an upland buffer zone of native plants along the seawall to try and educate people. So we have signage that mirrors what the zoo did in the water about the native plants that are above the water. But we're having to do that now as well with the grass that had grown back into the bed. But fortunately now we have a little bit of funding, and people like Skip from Change of Greeneries helping us with regard to doing some of the work there as far as getting it prepped again. But we'll be replanting that soon. This is when Nick used to work with Satellite Beach. He was their environmental science guy. We worked together to pick out the plants for in front of Satellite Beach City Hall. If you have never seen that, it's pretty cool. They tried to reestablish a little tropical hammock there in front of the town hall. And then this is something I'm really happy about too, is we're working with Green Gables, and we're trying to restore those 2.5 acres to native plants because it fits in really well with what their goals are as well from a historic perspective. With the Green Gables being from the late 1800s, they're trying to preserve that history, have it as a museum, have it as a venue maybe to rent out to weddings in the future. But we're trying to restore the grounds back to what the native plants that would have been in this area would have been at that time, and try and have gardens that will be beautiful as well. So we started doing some of those gardens. I don't know if you could probably drive there and park and walk around and see those. That's another one we're proud of. And then this one, the Unitarian Universalist Church, is right up not too far from here in West Melbourne, out near Lowe's, but it's on a side street out there. But super nice people, and they just wanted to get involved and do what they could as well. So they approached us about doing natives out there. And I think what we talked about is, collaboration. I think that's something we could all do together, as different groups could get together. And I think going forward, it might be more important than ever with recent events that there's power in numbers, maybe. We're expanding these plant restoration projects in Brevard, but hopefully, I think this county is a little bit ahead of some of the others. So, I'm hoping that it can translate into counties that border the lagoon that we're neighbors with that can also start following suit. And the real key here is that all these things help support biodiversity, wildlife, clean water, and our economic drivers for our community, which is the Indian River Lagoon. That's pretty much it. I don't know if anyone has questions, but.
I should have opened with this too, in terms of how many people just went to the landscaping tour. Awesome. And how many people are new to native plants? So good. So great. So this is a great presentation to kind of get you all introduced to why they're so important, and how you can make a difference. So really appreciate Bill sharing that. Struggling through.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You are fine. Really appreciate it.
And anyone wants my number, I offer it to anyone who wants to do this stuff, and I'll give advice. You can come get freebies, see what my yard looks like, get a tour. So afterwards, if you guys want to get my number, I can give it to you.
Give it another time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like a quarter.
It's almost a half. It's like 4.45 or something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Got it all packed in.
Yep.
Great job. So, now it's time for your free plan.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. Is it growing on it?